We'll spend a little bit of a moment first telling you each about ourselves. So I have the luxury of the privilege of going first. I'm a junior partner from our London office. I am a scientist nerd by background. My PhD is in developmental neurobiology over at King's College London, and I did some postdoctoral research in Parkinson's disease in Columbia University in the States, and then started a small biotech back in the UK before I joined McKinsey, and where I focus mostly on R&D strategy, and I lead our work on emerging technologies, including stem cells. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and I want to give the rest of our panel a chance to get some airtime. So would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Sure, thanks. So I'm Will West. I did a virology PhD originally, and then postdoced for a brief while before then joining industry, US-based Procter & Gamble in their sort of pharmaceutical division, and ended up running clinical operations for respiratory and GI. Obviously, there's a little bit of megalomania in me. I decided that I actually did want to run my own business, and left and started something that bumped along, started something else which is going pretty well, and more recently set up a new business out of Johns Hopkins called CTS Bioscience, doing cancer imaging and therapeutics.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rick Cousins, Research Director in GSK at the R&D site in Stevenage. Joined GSK as having completed postdoctoral research in chemistry as a medicinal chemist. Worked across many different therapeutic areas. More recently, I've had quite a lot of experience in setting up alliances with biotech companies through our external drug discovery group, working with 12, 13 different biotech companies across different modalities and disease areas. And more recently, I've been incubating some new science at GSK. So actually, in some senses, in a similar situation to you, trying to nurture some science to get to a decision point whether we go further or whether we never speak of it again.
Hi, good afternoon, Elena Fernandez-Kleinlein. I'm located at the Innovation Center here in London. My background actually is in chemistry. I started my career in food industry with Kraft. Currently, it's called Mondelez now. And always in product development, so always in research and development. Moved then to J&J in consumer products, the baby product development. Launched a couple of products there. Moved into different areas with engineered products, a lot of process-related product development around fibers, etc., and medical devices. And then moved to the States for a couple of years. Headed up a global group of researchers there for our adhesives and compromised skin businesses, and in London since 2 years. So I'm delighted to be here on the panel. Thanks.
Thank you. So I just wanted to set the scene a little bit for this discussion by just doing a synopsis of where the industry has got to in terms of and why it's so interested in talking to people like yourselves. So we've seen all the attrition data, all of those terrifying statistics of the 5% chance of making it to market. The pharmaceutical industry has exactly those percentages, if not worse percentages, than all of the biotechs that sit outside of its fine walls, despite all of the glossy logos and the beautiful buildings that they have. And some pharmaceutical companies are even quite direct about saying that they want to source 40% of their pipeline or something of that order from outside. And they benefit in a way from the fact that natural selection happens outside of those four walls in a way that it doesn't always inside them, where there's a bit more luxury around. And as a result, they can pick the very best of the talent, and from a product perspective. And so what we wanted to try to understand from this discussion, given that context, why, and this is my first question to the panel, if you were in a biotech today, why would you go with a pharmaceutical company? What would be in it for you to work with a big pharmaceutical company?
Should I kick off as you're looking at me? Okay. I would like to convince you that it is a good way of moving forward, of taking your science and delivering a product of value, a medicine that can bring real benefit to patients. Because working with a large pharma, you can have access through, you know, the types of relationships that I've been involved in, to the consultancy, the expertise. Perhaps it's in a disease area where you're focusing your efforts, but where we have marketed products, or we have compounds and modalities in development where we have, you know, really expanded and deeply understood the science and the value that we need to deliver in a medicine. I think also our commercial insight will be very valuable for you to understand. You know, you have a valuation in your mind. Well, we're most likely to have something very different, and there'll be reasons why, and it'd be good for you to understand that. But I think consultancy, I've seen relationships where we've been able to provide technical expertise. You're going to be a very small company. You're not going to have the luxury of having a broad toxicology department available to you, whereas, you know, the pharma industry does, and we can provide insight and allow you to move forward in perhaps a more difficult situation, because, you know, things come up that unexpectedly that you didn't have to deal with. We also have the real insight around what it is to deliver a product, a quality product in the commercial environment, and I think, you know, that type of learning is incredibly valuable and is unlikely to reside in a small biotech company. So those are some of the aspects, but I'm sure some of my colleagues here can throw some other ones.
Well, not so much from farm, but from the consumer end as well. I mean, I can certainly agree with you that tapping into the expertise of big companies, whether it's big pharma or big consumer companies, it's the infrastructure we can provide, whether it's labs, internal labs, toxicology, quality, etc. I think it's also internally the coaching and the mentoring that we can give to young people. And the interaction and get experts connected, you know, expertise, whether it's regulatory. I face a lot of the things is, you know, how do you classify the products, get some insights around that, and really connect biotech young entrepreneurs with the experts internally within the companies.
I think for me, having sort of been on both sides, if you're a micro company like you're trying to set up, I mean, the key thing for you is you need resources and money. You know, you can't get to market without resources and money. It costs an awful lot of money to take biotech type opportunities forward. And so you're looking for three things from an interaction, really. You're looking sort of validation that you've actually got something that the market wants. Well, if you do a deal with a GSK or whatever, you know, you're getting validation that actually you've got something that's real, and shareholders kind of like that. You know, shareholders won't back you until they know what you've got is actually wanted by the incumbents who are in there. The other is it can bring revenue in two forms. One is it can bring straight upfront cash, although that's getting less common for smaller businesses, but actually it can bring a new shareholder in as well, so, you know, and bring in money that way. And the third is that actually it can bring long-term potential exit. So exits are mainly done with partners who trust each other. And if you've got an interaction with a large pharma company, you know, they're going to trust you more than someone who's just coming straight off the street. I suppose the clear thing to consider as a small business is what is going to be the cost to me to going into a relationship like this versus what is the benefit. Having one interaction with a large company is okay. Having two is slightly better, because then you've got a bit of more competitive tension and people don't feel that you're wholly aligned with one business. Having 7 is a nightmare. So, you know, you've got to think about how you want to structure this and what you want to get out of it. The other thing is you've got to keep your other shareholders happy too. So they don't want to see that you might have given away the family silver to a company that's come in very early and got a right over, you know, the lead product. So you've really got to get your timing right. The other thing is to make sure that you're negotiating from a position of strength, because pharma, you know, and I used to sit in exactly that chair, they try and get a good deal. So, you know, if you are running out of money, but you're really trying to get a deal to bring some money in, it's going to be a less good deal than one where you're puffed up and, you know, got competitive tension. So you do have to think about cost benefit, but overall industry interaction is the way forward. I've used it multiple times, and it does bring validation, revenue, and builds relationships for exit.
Okay, so
Could I just maybe
Yeah,
add
go
a
on,
couple of
please.
points? I think you touched on something very careful, very well there, and I think it was described really nicely by Matthew earlier. The different inflection points as the life history of your company, and the clear value inflection points, such as a clinical proof of concept. Well, you need to make sure that you're delivering a clinical results and a clinical data that is relevant to the company that you're likely to be selling it to, your customer. So, you could do a wonderful clinical study, but if you're not measuring what we believe are the key parameters or the key biomarkers or functional endpoints, we're not going to necessarily, one, believe in that data, and two, we may end up deciding that you need to repeat it all over again. But with the right endpoints. So I think getting that early line of sight to what are the key data, so that you really focus your money, which is going to be pretty rare for you. It's going to be a rare commodity, to make sure you get the maximum return on the money that you have available to do the clinical study. So I think that's really important. And just I have seen, certainly from my interactions where we combined with a small biotech company, in the rare disease space, rare diseases, I mean, Matthew highlighted, are attractive because there might be relatively small clinical studies. But by definition, the patients are rare and they are distributed globally around the world. And so working with a big pharma can allow you to access their network of their global clinical network to set up and help run those clinical studies more effectively with a reach that is beyond most small biotech companies.
Okay, so you have sat down with the leadership team of your small biotech and you've decided that pharma is the route. You're going to use it to get dollars invested, frankly, credibility with other investors. You're going to use it to get the skills and the coaching that you need, and to get the scale of all of the resources, toxicology, clinical, regulatory, and hopefully ultimately Salesforce. What is it that pharma is looking for in these companies now that you've decided you're in? What's your criteria for a company that you might be keen to work with?
Do you want me to kick off? Yeah. I guess, where we're coming from in J&J is clearly that we need to be convinced of the science. So science has to be robust, and internally, our experts will reach a level of conviction that is differentiated and unique to a certain degree. I think we're also looking for an ability or capability to actually reach to that proof of concept. I mean, to your point, a lot of early stage opportunities, you'll have preclinical data, you have in vitro data, how transferable, how capable or able is that team to actually get to the next milestone to prove your concept. The other thing is leadership. I think we're looking for the potential of leading that program as a biotech, and also the capability of collaborating with industry. There's a lot of resistance sometimes in biotechs, and yes, big pharma has a certain perception out there, but the ability to listen, to ask questions, to interact in a way that that could be the right partner for that industrial company, I think is key as well. Ultimately, we're looking for IP, for an asset, for something that can differentiate, so that is relevant. Companies may have not filed it yet. We can help them through that process as well, to reach a certain protection, intellectual protection out there. And ultimately, I think coming from the consumer end, I think all the ideas have to be somehow rooted in an insight, in a meaningful insight. You want to do something for a patient or a consumer, but it has to be compelling and meaningful. And I think that's also something we need, we're really looking for.
I mean, I 100% agree. I mean, when you go in and have those initial conversations, you've got to be credible. Why you, why them? And that is data driven, but it's also driven by personal connections, oh, well, I know someone who knows you, that kind of stuff. But it's also about endorsement as well. Well, actually, we've got this new prostate potential drug. the leading prostate guy at Sloan Kettering is saying this is the best thing that they've ever seen. So, you know, you might not necessarily be the biggest prostate person in the world, but the one endorses you. I think there's another aspect to interacting with pharma that we've got to be very clear on. You know, these are not one single entities. These are hundreds of thousands of people that are in one company. And so you're not just selling to one person. You've got to sell to the leadership team. You know, why does this add to their business? You've got to sell to the scientists. You know, is your idea really better than the one that they've been working on for 5 years internally? And you've got to also sell to the transactional team, because that's a separate group, and you've got to make sure that you're high up on their agenda too. So I'd be really analytical about thinking about what they want, but also what the different constituencies within the business. You know, you've got to make sure that your unique selling point is very clearly business driven, the science is really credible and you've got data, but also you've got the sort of the personal interactions to actually make the deal go through. Because the business development people will have 100 deals on their table. Why are they going to put you in that top 10 that they're going to do over the next 3 months?
I think I agree with all of the above. I think sometimes we're very clear about what we want, and sometimes we actually share that with the world. You know, there will be, we will share our business development strategies, the key areas that we're looking for, the key types of products, and we may also define what we don't want. But sometimes we don't know what we want. So that's where having clarity in your pitch about what is the real value that you're generating, what is the unmet need that you're going to overcome and address, because you know that might then allow us to have that line of sight to a medicine, to understand the vision, and therefore that would potentially interest us to go into further discussions. So I think, you know, do not underestimate the power of a really clear, short, concise pitch in engaging our thinking and engaging our interest. So, as I said, sometimes we do know what we want and we're very clear and we go actively looking for it, and other times things can walk through the door and they can stimulate our interest, and then from that a relationship can be built. So don't be completely put off if you see that your idea is not on the list. However, do be sensible. You know, if the company is not working in medical devices, it probably is unlikely that they're going to start it, a whole business based on your early idea. So again, do your homework about who you're going to talk to.
Just to quickly add to that. I mean, that is absolutely right. But in the meeting, you know, have your radar open, because you know, this has happened several times when I've gone in with a really clear pitch. This is how we're going to make your business hundreds of millions. This is the product for you for the future. It fits in with your portfolio this way. And someone in the room has gone, actually, we could use this over here. So you don't know what's going on inside Big Pharma. They do. So whilst you must have a clear pitch, always be open that, you know, there may be other possibilities within that company that you don't yourselves realise.
Okay, so your biotech company has entered a business plan competition and it's learned how to create the perfect pitch. It's tested and rigorous and compelling. But you don't know how to enter into this seemingly monolithic pharma world. What are your different entry points, and how can you start to make sure that you start to have some of those conversations that you were describing?
Yeah, sure.
So there are actually many different ways. There is the official way at GSK, which is we have a group email box for business development, www.bd@gsk.com. Ideas come into that, proposals come into that, and they are then triaged to circulate to the different relevant business development teams. But, you know, use your networks as well. You will have colleagues, or you may have friends, professional colleagues who are working in a different pharma industry who can also help introduce you to the relevant or help you understand the process at the company. I think many companies have these sort of group entry approaches, but use your network, understand what the processes are for a officially contacting the company. There are also buyer-partnering meetings. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as your starting point unless you're an established company, because they're not cheap to go to, but they are very effective ways of meeting a lot of potential partners in a very short period.
Yeah, I think in J&J, one of the reasons we have the innovation centers is exactly that. It's a conduit into the bigger pharma and bigger organization that we have. And we not only have pharma, we have three sectors. We have devices, pharma, and consumer. And sometimes it's really difficult to understand who is my next contact person within the organization. So the innovation centers are the door into our organization, and a lot of people use either our website or can contact us directly through the portal that we have set up. So I agree. It's conferences, it's network, it's LinkedIn. I mean, I get a lot of contacts through LinkedIn and saying, well, I've got this idea. What do we do? Or the website. We also have a portal there where you can just put your ideas in there. So there's some of the examples.
Don't dismiss the formal ways in, like Elena's saying, because actually going through the innovation centres, and most big pharma have similar things, actually they can often get you ready for that particular company, or can steer you on the angle that's more likely to work. So I definitely don't discount that. But do use a network. If you're Greg Winter and you walk into J&J, you're going to get an audience with the CSO. You're going to find it a bit more difficult. That's just reality. So therefore, use your network. Find the equivalents that know someone who knows someone that can get you that meeting with the CSO. I think the other key thing in terms of the approach and how to make it happen is you've got to be really clear on who's going to make the decision. This is not easy to work out, even for people within the pharma sometimes themselves. And actually, it can be really mundane and be down to things like, what is the size of the deal? So a particular R&D department may have a budget to sign off 100,000, but they can't sign off a 2 million deal. If you really want a 2 million deal, you've got to talk to the marketing guys, because they've got a big budget. And if you can create new data that means that they can get new claims on their product, well, they can write big checks. So one of the key things that you're going to have to find out in those very early days, and again, places like the innovation centres can really help, is who are going to be the key decision makers and what are the financial drivers to that, and who writes the check. That's the person you've got to influence.
Okay, so you went to this amazing business plan competition and you met a guy who introduced you to a guy who got you a meeting, and then suddenly you're standing up there, you do your pitch, it's as compelling as we said because you practiced it so hard, and then suddenly you're starting to talk about real money and real investment, and it all gets a little bit scary and real. As people start talking to you about terms and different ways of forming that relationship, what's the advice to companies as they start, in terms of different approaches, weighing up different approaches, and anything that they need to be mindful or cautious of?
Well, dare I say it, do get a good lawyer. A decent lawyer will have experience of doing multiple deals in many different forms. You can slice and dice these deals in so many different ways, more than you can ever imagine, and a good lawyer will know what works and what doesn't work. And if they're on your side from the early days, they can structure it so it's right from you. The other thing that I would add is, if you think it's going to take 3 months, it will take 9. Be very realistic about how long these things take to work, because you've got to align so many different components within an organisation. It just takes time to get people in a room iteratively. The legal side, you're obviously reasonably bright and analytical just by being in this room. You can work it out. There is no magic. You just need people to advise you on what works and what doesn't work, what clauses need to be in there, what doesn't need to be in there.
I think going into term sheets or starting negotiations, reiterate I think what the panel has been saying around clarity of what you want out of the deal, right? So I think with a clarity on the ingoing position, what it is that you want out into a negotiation is important. I think also not to shy off of asking a lot of questions. I've come across some negotiations with biotech where some assumptions were just made. And once you're taking these assumptions, you just lose sight of asking the killer questions, the real key questions, not only from an experimental perspective, but really on the negotiation and on the terms. And I think that's something that people have to really think about when they get on the table and discuss, apart from the lawyer, which is important.
Yeah, I think I'd add that you are going to be a small company and you are dealing with a Goliath of a company, 100,000 maybe, 70, 80,000 employees. And within that, we're going to have the full availability to us of specialised groups. And what might be, I think, actually quite scary the first time is, the pharma company will roll out a group of people who do the transacting, roll out a different group of people who do the legal, roll out a different group of people who do the scientific due diligence, and but that's because we're taking it very serious. We're actually very interested in what you've got to offer. So it is a sort of validation of our level of interest that we're prepared to roll out after series after series after series of different specialised teams to help build the deal. So, see that as actually a complement to our interests and don't lose your nerve there. Nonetheless, it is quite scary. What I would also say, and I think is really important, is that there is absolute alignment between the management team who are driving the company forward and the investors. Let's be absolutely clear that you're aligned on what you want and why you've entered into the discussions and the negotiations. It is very, very disappointing when we'll get halfway through a negotiation and it becomes clear that the management have got a view that is very different from the investors, and it all unwinds in a very unattractive and unsatisfactory way. And it is a real opportunity cost for everybody, not just for the farmer, but also for you, because you would have lost that opportunity that you could have been applying your effort somewhere else. So really, really important that the investors and the management team are truly aligned on where they're taking the company and what they're trying to achieve.
Part of that where you're taking the company can get quite personal, right? Because you've got a huge platform technology and they're only interested in one product for one indication, and you want to take the whole thing in a different direction. Do you have any guidance for how to preempt, think through it when it happens? Because it's inevitable that when you start to have these interactions, this big company will have a very different perspective on where they want to take your baby, effectively.
This is biotech. Be nimble. If a different route is the one that looks like it's going to yield value, follow that one. Be flexible, but know what you're going to get out of it versus what they're going to get out of it. Just be very clear. The other thing is that you will be under a lot of obligation to deliver certain things to the farmer, but make sure that's a two-way thing, because I have had projects that I've licensed into Big Pharma who then have under-resourced it and then not pushed it forward, as frankly I would have liked or could possibly even done myself. And so you've got to make sure it's a two-way process. One thing that's going to be out of your control is there's a lot of change in R&D within Big Pharma at the moment. So the group that you've done the deal with isn't going to be the same group that you'll be interacting with in 2 years. And that will affect the priority that your project has within the company. Again, don't be frightened of that, embrace it, but just network like crazy to make sure that you know the group that might be the one taking over and not just the one you're working with today.
Yeah, I think the comment what I would do is I think there's always opportunity in if you're developing a platform and you're looking at it from a particular area and how to exploit it, how to commercialize this eventually, and pharma has a different aspect. I mean, I agree with the panel here that it's certainly something to negotiate, it's something to talk about. I mean, there could be, geographical implications and how to, slice and dice the platform, or it could be a different indication that you want to explore that more. So I think it's really about sitting down, getting things on the table, and be clear and in the negotiation of what is possible.
Yes, I probably look at it from the two ends. The beginning part, I think it's really important to get clarity around the scope of what it is that's on the table that you're prepared to share, that you wish to enter into an agreement over, because that will then form the basis around the future negotiations. So again, it's having that clarity of the board and the management team of what it is that you want to take forward into it. The other end is when you have a deal in place, the world changes, and that happens. And I think we will always want to make sure that we leverage a maximum out of a relationship, out of an investment. And if we truly believe there is a different opportunity that needs to be taken, I think you should at least hear us out and see if there's a way forward here. But the world does change, and just because you had a deal that set in play 5 years ago that X, Y, and Z would happen in years 6, 7, and 8, unfortunately, there's a lot that goes on that can change the reality.
But I think that the thing that's really positive, though, is that Big Pharma now see this as an efficient way of accessing innovation, and therefore the conversations that you can have today versus 10 years ago are much more equal. And that means that you will get something that's more fairer, no matter what the situation that might be. You know, we now have an efficient system of getting really good technologies up and running, which frankly we didn't have 20 years ago. Big Pharma are changing their models. They're not having the big Bell Labs type centres for doing R&D. And those two things are now equaling it out. And actually, it's a really positive place at the moment to do pharma interaction.